This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. All right, I am here with the awesome and amazing Drew Davis, author of Town. Hey, I'm just going to talk about the books for a quick second. Mr. Brandscaping, Mr. Town Inc. Welcome to The Speaking Show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is fun.
I went to your website. I marinated in everything Drew Davis. My first question out of the gate, because, the way that you deliver your programs, you're a content speaker, but you deliver awesome and amazing keynotes. And we all know there's a huge difference between a keynote and a content session or a breakout session or a workshop. How did you come to that presenting style where people still walk away with a tremendous amount of insight, but you tell stories and it's more of an emotional journey than do this, don't do this, start doing this, stop doing that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it starts at the very beginning. I think there are two things that have driven my speaking business. I think one is trying to come up with a speech that has high referability. So I know that if it's entertaining enough, but has enough insight at different tiers on the audience level, that I'll actually get more referrals than not. So like for me, there's a big key in delivering a performance that is entertaining as a big piece of that puzzle. I think the second thing is I realized pretty quickly when I first started speaking that there were a lot of experts out there. I mean, you go to any event, right? And it's just, there's experts galore. There is, in the marketing world, there are SEO experts, there are content marketing experts, there are social media experts. And so, especially if you want to get paid, it's easier to find a free expert than it is to pay an expert in the industry, unless there's a key differentiator. And so for me, I made a decision pretty early on that I didn't want to be an expert. I wanted to be a visionary. And I spent a lot of time trying to answer questions that Google couldn't answer so that I delivered something that was different and unique and was really challenging the audience to think about something new. And I think those two things have added up to the kind of performance I deliver.
So I'm just channeling our audience. And, there's going to be customer service speakers. There's going to be strategy speakers. There's going to be health and wellness speakers that go, oh my God, that's what I need to do. I need to move beyond Google and I need to deliver an experience. When you came to this insight, what were your first couple of steps in moving away from being that informational speaker to the more transformational, experiential, you can't find this stuff on Google speaker?
It started at the really beginning of choosing the topics that I thought would be relevant, because I think if you, I drew a matrix actually.
This is how your brain works is really what you're saying.
Yeah. I'm like an overanalyzer, and I think you got to get things more complicated before you can simplify them. And so I spent a lot of time going through agendas for conferences and plotting on my little matrix, which was basically like a horizontal, x-axis that was essentially accepted insight on one side and new thought on the other side, And then on the y-axis, it was kind of challenging traditional thinking. And on the bottom, it was tips and tricks, And I took just the session titles. I didn't even read the session descriptions. I would just read the session titles and I would say, given the session title, where does that plot? And it was very clear to me that the keynotes for all of these events that I plotted were in the upper right quadrant. They were visionary type presentations, and there were only 2, 3, maybe 4 at a big event. Whereas all of the other sessions and all the other speakers could be plotted in that bottom left quadrant. And the other 2 quadrants turned out to be kind of useless because if you're talking about something that's very well accepted, but you've got a new spin on it, no one really cares. And if you're in the other quadrant, you're actually talking about something that no one's really interested in at all. And so I said, well, wait a second, what are the things that bother me? And I stopped reading and consuming the tips and tricks type of content. And I started immediately trying to say, what bothers me about the marketplace? So for example, about 2 years ago, I work on a new speech every year, and it usually takes about 2 or 3 years before it's a highly referable speech. But I started working on a speech that has now become called The Curiosity Factor. But one thing that bothered me was that everybody said that everyone's attention span is very short. You can't create a podcast, David, that's 30 minutes long. No one will listen to it. It's got to be bite-sized and snackable.
Oh, we've lost them all already. Yeah,
no one's listening.
No one's listening right now. Just you and me, buddy.
I know. Well, you and I can chat, and they can just go on to Instagram. And so I thought, look, this can't be true. I came out of television, and I know that people binge watch, a whole season of Stranger Things on Netflix. So, obviously, that's not the fact. And I spent a year trying to gather some research and answer the question, how do you maintain people's attention in an attention-starved world where, brands and customers and companies are looking to earn their audience's attention? And that's a question that you can't answer with tips and tricks and, hacks. And so the result has been a really, really successful keynote called The Curiosity Factor. And it took a long time to kind of get it to the point where it was entertaining enough and insightful enough that everybody got something out of it.
Now, let's go. I want to talk about you said a couple very intriguing things all in a row, but I'm going to try and unpack that for our audience. This is the segment where we call back up the truck.
Slow it down there.
Beep, beep. Hold on, back up the truck. So new speech every year, but it takes 2 or 3 years to perfect that and get that as referable as you would like it to be. Talk about how that arc also affects your book publishing and your thought leadership. So when the Brandscaping book came out, there must have been a Brandscaping speech that was new that year, not quite referable. And then you worked on it, perfected it. Now it's a home run, amazing product. Same with Town Inc.
Yeah.
How do you connect
the
development process?
I'll be honest. I think I did it all wrong with Brandscaping. So let's skip Brandscaping.
Okay.
So that people don't have to know what's wrong. Here's what I've realized. I can tell you what I learned in publishing Brandscaping. I mean, I wrote the book and then went out and started speaking about it. And almost from the very first speaking gig I did, a promotional gig for the book, I got questions after the speech that weren't answered in the book. And I realized, wait a second, this is really idiotic. I should have answered that, but it just never occurred to me. And, that happened for 2 years after the book was written. And I thought, what a missed opportunity. So my philosophy on publishing books is completely inverted. I started about 4 years ago or 5 years ago working on a speech called The Loyalty Loop. It's called The Loyalty Loop now. I should say that a lot of these speeches evolve so much that the speech I started giving is, the idea is still there, but the speech has changed given what I've learned in the marketplace. And so, the next book is coming out in September, and it's called The Loyalty Loop. And it's the result of speaking so often about the loyalty loop that I've learned how to answer the audience's questions. I've created a much better presentation. And I also have the ability now to take this and turn it into a much better book. Here's the problem with books and speaking. If you use the book to create demand for speaking, your speech isn't that great. When the book's demand is at its highest. When your book comes out, it's at the escalation point. 100 people are buying your book every day, and the speech you're booking and delivering at that point doesn't match the expectation the book has set. So if you create an awesome speech that increases demand for a book, and people are saying, I want to learn more about this, do you have a book? That's when I think you should write the book. And that's when you have now the perfect ability to maximize your revenue from speaking and leverage the audiences you've garnered over the last 4 years to then email them all, call every event organizer back and say, hey, you remember that speech I gave 4 years ago? Well, it's changed and I have a book. Let's talk about, buying a bunch of books and I'll see you at the event.
Would it be right, Drew, to say that if you have a traditionally published book where the timelines are very long, and you say, well, my book's not going to come out for another 12 months or 15 months, that's the moment to start selling the speech 12 to 15 months before the book comes out. So when the book comes out, by now the speech is pretty darn good, if not awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you should start speaking about your big idea for the next book, even if you're not sure it deserves a book right now. So, the Curiosity Factor, I imagine, is going to be my next book, given the response that the speech has had. It's not ready for a book yet, but I can see the potential for a book. I've had a huge demand for workshops as a result of the keynote, and I don't do a lot of workshops. And to be quite frank, I'm pretty bad at workshops. So I've got to work on my workshops if I'm going to start delivering it. But when people start asking for a workshop, it's another clear signal that if you had a book, they'd buy the book because it would give them the insight they needed to answer the questions that the keynote can't.
Right.
And I think that's pretty key. And referability for a speech is a key piece of the business piece of the puzzle. 93% of my business is referred. I know a speech is ready to really promote and command the biggest fee when I can generate 3 leads from every speaking gig I deliver. I call them stage side leads. So like when I get off the stage within 72 hours, if I can get 3 high quality leads for new speaking gigs, then the speech is ready for bigger and bigger stages.
Totally right. Totally right. Exactly right. And by the way, if you're not getting those 3 stage side leads, you may want to work on your speech.
That's it. So I work on my speech until I'm getting the leads.
Right.
So, it's easy I think one of the things I learned really early on is the only people that come up to you after a speech and say your speech was awesome are the people who like the speech. So you constantly think you're an awesome speaker because everybody's just like, you were fantastic.
Well, there are those 1 or 2 people that come up to you. Drew, are you open to some constructive criticism? And to which my answer is no.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not.
I'm always open to constructive criticism. I always see those people in the feedback surveys. There's always that one guy who hated it,
Right.
And that's okay. I'm not for everyone, and I'm willing to. It doesn't make it hurt less, to be honest. But on the same side of that coin, it's really easy to kind of blame the audience for a poor performance or or external circumstances. And I've gotten to the point where I don't do that, or I won't do that. If my first gut reaction is, oh, it wasn't a great room, or they weren't high energy, it was too early in the morning, I immediately quash those. And I videotape every one of my speeches. And I alternate between videotaping me and then videotaping the audience, actually. And I watch them back within 24 hours so that I can actually see my performance and watch people's reaction. And I learn a ton about how to refine the speech and make it better.
Yeah.
And I rehearse that religiously.
Hey, good looking. Are you currently getting paid to speak? Would you like to ramp that up? We can help. Book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team at doitmarketing.com/call, and let's see what we might do together. The call is free, but the results may be priceless. So let me ask you again, you're writing my questions for me, so I'm just going to kind of back up the truck here a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
With the book and with the speech, I know there's 2 schools of thought. There's the research school of thought, like our buddy Jay Baer, for example, hires a research company, does all the statistical analysis, and then he comes to some conclusions and he puts his spin on those conclusions. And there's other speakers where they're hired because of their opinion, because of their bias, because of their slant, because of their manifesto of the way the world should be, kind of like along the lines of your visionary grid. Do you ever get pulled in or tempted by that world of, I should research this and ask 5,000 brands or ask 5,000 customers what they think of this?
Yeah.
Or is it just, listen, it's the world according to Drew, and you're a poet philosopher?
Well, in Town Inc., I actually partnered with Northeastern University to do some quantified research. And so I enjoyed the process, and I feel like I've done both, Brandscaping is very much a story-driven case study kind of book with a bunch of insight and examples that I pulled from all over. And Town Inc. is much more kind of a mix-up of the 2 stories that are inspirational and exciting and lesson-driven with some research to back up the claims that are made in the book. But I think the short answer to your question is I feel like a great visionary speaker never has the solution to the problem at hand. They're presenting a solution, and they're humble enough to believe that this isn't the only way to solve whatever problem it is that the audience is facing. It's just the way that they think is best today. And so even with something like the curiosity factor or loyalty loop or even brandscaping, the thinking evolves. And a lot of that is driven by audience feedback. Like, hey, here's a question I have. I learn a lot when I sit down after a morning keynote. I usually try to stay the whole day, and I'll go to lunch with people. And I love to sit at the table and hear people kind of talk through what I presented and hear about objections and challenges because they make the hypothesis I'm presenting better. I walk back to my hotel room thinking, they have a point. Like, that isn't something I've ever addressed, and it's not something I thought about, and it doesn't look like the current solution I'm presenting solves that piece of the puzzle. And you make a decision, well, should it? Or maybe it doesn't, and that's an exception, and we'll just be aware of it. Makes you a smarter speaker. I don't think you have to be the sage with all the answers. I think you actually earn a lot of trust by presenting an idea instead of the idea.
Yeah. So just two quick things about that. And I love this. I have a fantastic client named Rick Maurer, and Rick says that part of your persuasion quotient is how willing and open are you to be persuaded about your opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You're a more persuasive person if you're more open to being persuaded yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that is part of the leap from expert to visionary. I think if you're trying to solve a big problem and you realize that, there are very few other people working on the same problem, you all of a sudden become very open to the idea and maybe more humble that you don't have the answer. When you're stuck in Expertville, it's easy to feel very combative. Like person A doesn't believe what I believe, so their recommendations are very different, and I'm staunchly opposed to those,
Right. They're wrong, Drew.
They're totally wrong. So if you get out of Expertville, I think it opens you up to that kind of humility, and, that goes a long way.
And you also put this really smartly, I thought, in your video. I think it's the video on your meeting planner page about you're not going to teach the audience what to think about an issue. You're going to teach them how to think about it.
Yeah.
That's about a whole new lens and a whole new perspective, and you're going to invite them to consider a different point of view.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm inviting them, at a very top level to challenge whatever their conventional notion is and kind of rethink it for themselves, given the ideas that I'm presenting. And I think that makes it more fun, actually, to be honest.
Oh, for sure. Well, and I think that when you're sparking a debate in an audience member's mind, that is much more compelling than trying to do a data dump or give them the one answer according to you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it also gives you a lot of flexibility in the kinds of stories you can tell. And I think that makes a big difference, in the mind of the audience, helping them relate something outside of their industry to what they're doing is more about inviting them to teach them how to think about that case study instead of immediately having them disassociate from the case study and say, well, you just showed me a consumer example. We're a B2B business that sells financial services. How does that relate to me? You have to kind of help bridge the gap by teaching them how to look at that case study.
Right. Exactly. For sure. I want to go back to another comment that you made, which is that you don't do a lot right now with workshops. What is your business model? Is it mostly keynote? Do you do some consulting? Kind of what's on the service menu? Like when people come up to you for that stage side, hey, Drew, we'd love to bring you into our company. Do you do consulting? Do you do coaching? Can we hire you to help us on a bigger, deeper level? Or is it really just, can you come and speak to our group versus this group versus that group? What's on the Drew menu?
Yeah, the pie is 100% speaking. So, I used to run an agency and sold it in 2012. And after that, I kind of pledged not to have any long-term clients anymore. And so today, I do about 65 or so speaking gigs a year. And that's it, just speaking, and the books as well. But the books is a pretty small portion of that revenue overall. 93% of the speaking gigs are referred. About 2% are speakers bureaus. The rest are booked on my own. And, I kind of religiously track all the data. I think one of the big frustrations I had when I first started speaking full time after I left the agency, it was kind of not feeling in control of the business of speaking, feeling like, I don't know, just the leads come in or, I speak at an event, I get 2 speaking gigs, but I don't know what happens after that. And so I spent a lot of time kind of tracking stuff to figure out how to optimize the business so that I actually know where I'm going and can actually predict what's going on and get higher fees, and those kinds of things mean a lot to me. So I focus squarely just on the business of speaking.
Now, you have something very compelling on your website, and that is the button that says, do I ever speak for free?
Yes, I do.
Under that, it says, yes, but don't worry, it's not a big but. So tell us the policy, and then tell us how you came to that policy and what hole that strategy is filling in your world.
Yeah, sure. Well, I do speak for free, to be really clear about it. I speak about 9 or 10 times a year for free. I use those speaking gigs, to be honest, speaker to speaker, to test very new ideas. So generally they can't book my highest book keynote because, that I've got refined and I'm very good at it. What I'm trying to do is aerate a new idea with a new audience to figure out what I need to amplify and refine. And the policy works like this. Just essentially people email me. Usually I get 1 or 2 or 3 of these a week. They email me and they're added to an email list and they tell me what city they're in. And every time I get a new gig in that city, I email those people for that city and say, hey, I'm going to be there on June 14th. I'm happy to stay an extra day if you'll just pick up one more day of the hotel room. And I'd love to speak for free for your audience. If you can get them together, let's do it. And so, I have a lot more people that want me to speak for free than I end up speaking for free every year. But I try to match up everything from the topic to the city and the group. I don't want to just show up and give my presentation because I want to give it. I want to make sure it's adding value for them and it's the right audience. But it's been a lot of fun. And those events are also good for me in picking a new niche. So every year I pick a new niche to target from a business development standpoint. And, those free opportunities that I have are a good way for me to test my resonance with that audience, my understanding of their kind of situation and sophistication and breadth and depth. And I get a lot out of them as well. So it's a really great tool for me. And the other thing is, by the way, I generally only speak to nonprofits for those gigs. I mean, some of them are not, but primarily I try to give my time to a nonprofit.
So there's 2 kinds of nonprofits in our world, obviously. There's the nonprofit membership associations, right? And then there's the nonprofit for cause, charitable type of groups. You're talking about the second one, not the first one.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I do it for both. So I'll do it for a membership or association if the dates align, and it works out for everybody. Yeah. But I generally don't make a trip just for a free association opportunity unless it fits my niche very, very specifically. What's funny about that is I was actually booked to speak at an event in Chicago. And at the last minute, they kind of dropped me from the agenda, which was really odd. It was a time constraint issue anyway, and kind of a misunderstanding on both. But I had already booked the travel. I was already there. So I posted a thing on Facebook and said, hey, look, I'm going to be in Chicago. Does anybody want me to come to their organization and speak for free, or know a nonprofit that needs some help or inspiration? And it was amazing. I got literally dozens and dozens of people within a few hours connecting me with nonprofits who needed inspiration. And so I went and spent a day with the people at Golden Apple, which is a teaching nonprofit for teachers in Chicago, with phenomenal organization. And I spent the day with them. And I personally found it so rewarding that I was like, I just need to do this more often. It's silly not to be able to give back. And it's stuck.
Wow, that is totally amazing, and a very, very smart strategy too. Now, you mentioned that posting on Facebook. I want to talk about the 7% of your business that does not come by referral. Yeah. Do you do outbound marketing? Do you find that social media works to get speaking gigs where decision makers are paying attention on Facebook or LinkedIn? Or give us the kind of breakdown of that little teeny tiny 7% slice of how Drew gets business when he's not referred.
The teeny tiny 7% is driven squarely on LinkedIn. So I actually do have a YouTube series called The Loyalty Loop that I've been doing for 2 years. There's an episode every Thursday that debuts on YouTube. I post it every Friday on LinkedIn as well. And I also do a monthly series called Unsolicited Advice, which is actually really funny. It's like I write a handwritten letter to someone who deserves some unsolicited advice, ranging from real people like the CMO of Comcast all the way down to people who have websites with 0-second pop-ups and stuff like that. Anyway, there's a direct correlation to inbound leads that I've never heard of, have never seen me speak, and the posting of those videos on LinkedIn. And a lot of times the lead comes in, they hit the put a date on hold button on my website, and it'll say I just saw your video on LinkedIn. That was amazing. I'm not even sure what you talk about, but we have an event on this date. Would love to talk about having you speak there. So the videos are definitely the number one unsolicited lead gen tool for me. And if some of the other ones before this, about 2 years ago, a lot of them were just web searches that were this is funny. So a lot of people in the old days used to speak at South by Southwest, and still do, or speak at, in my business, social media marketing world, or some of these big events that attract a huge number of kind of the market leaders in our industry. And it turns out that I actually haven't spoken at those events primarily because a lot of those events don't pay speakers. And that was my initial thought. Well, if you don't pay speakers, I won't do it. Turns out like I was like the fourth or fifth speaker on a lot of people's lists of potential speakers. But because the other 4 or 5 speakers weren't available because they were speaking at South by Southwest or Social Media Marketing World, they would call me and I'd end up getting those gigs that were totally, just a web search that got me on a list. And so those are kind of the 2 primary ways I've been booked when it's not a referral speech.
So now South by Southwest week and Social Media Marketing World week, like you're booked like 10 times those weeks. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's actually great. It's easy to get booked those weeks, it turns out.
Everyone else is speaking for free. We're getting
I know, exactly.
We're getting Davis in here again.
And I raise my fee. Yeah, exactly. It just skyrockets that week because they don't have any other options.
Right. What a great episode. Wowza. Tell you what, if you want to ramp up your revenue as an expert who speaks professionally, you should really check out our free online training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Give me a little bit of a sketch, because I know that you spent some, as you mentioned, you spent some time as an executive. You built up this agency. You sold the agency. Were you doing speaking as a CEO? Were you doing speaking as part of your executive profile? And how did that...
Yeah.
When did the light bulb go off that, hey, I might be able to kind of flip this into my full-time thing?
Yeah, speaking was our only lead gen tool for the agency, to be honest. We did some other stuff that was effective, but not as effective as speaking. I started speaking in about 2008 as a lead gen tool. And, the demand got so high for me as a speaker in the marketing world that we had to kind of really focus our efforts on the right lead gen opportunities. And speaking, I would say, built that business. Tipping Point Labs was built on speaking. And then in 2012, when we sold the agency, I took some time off. And I actually, to be frank, at that point, I didn't really enjoy speaking anymore. I kind of resented the fact that I was on the road, 200 days a year speaking to generate leads for a business that I was also running. And so I found it really exhausting and not a great use of my time, really. Like I didn't want to speak for leads, I guess, because I didn't feel like I was being rewarded directly for the speaking. Meanwhile, the other, partners I had were at the agency kind of running the day-to-day, and they didn't have to deal with all the travel woes and exhaustion. Funnily enough, they always thought there was a big disconnect. They always thought, wow, what a cool lifestyle, And I was like, man, I don't want to do any more cocktail hours and shaking hands and scanning business cards for you guys to follow up on. I'm kind of done with this. So I took some time off and decided I wouldn't speak again. And I didn't have any plans to really do anything. But my wife, after a while of me watching, 12 hours of Judge Judy marathons, my wife was like, maybe you need to get out of the house and do something. And I was still getting speaking inquiries, especially since Brandscaping had come out. And I said, well, I'll go do some of these speaking gigs. And it reinvigorated my love and passion for it and turned it into a real challenge for me to kind of craft a better and better presentation that was designed in a very different way to kind of help me, for fun, kind of explore some of the biggest questions facing businesses today.
There's the last couple questions about this, and then we'll wrap it up. This is just so fascinating. And we're going to have you back, I think. There's so much juice here, my friend. We got to squeeze the orange to the maximum. Sure. When you were doing the 200 days a year on the road as the guy, face and the voice of this agency and the face and the voice of your brand, was that all free, or were you occasionally getting paid as well?
It started as free. But in order to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff and make sure that we were getting to the right opportunities, we would kind of cherry pick which opportunities we would offer to speak for a fee. It was kind of like this. Hey, this event, it looks like there's going to be all executives and they're exactly our target market. We should just speak for free for sure. Then there was a second tier that was like, well, this looks like it could be a mixed bag. We've never spoken or been to this event before. Not sure. So let's charge them a small fee so that they know we're committed, but also know that they need to put some skin in the game to make it worth it for us. And then there was a whole bucket of other people who would charge a high fee because we thought the audience probably wasn't the right target. And if they were willing to pay, we'd be willing to do it. Much more as a service. So it was kind of an inverse speaking model. It was like the opposite of what you'd do if you were trying to speak.
Right, for sure. Now, did your agency specialize in a certain industry or niche so that the events were a little bit easier to identify? Or were you willing to work with any kind of company, Kind of how are you doing that
well,
targeting of the events to know which were a profit-rich, target-rich environment?
Yeah, same strategy I use today. Every year I picked a new niche. I was actually not the CEO, I was the chief strategy officer of the agency. And so every year we'd pick a new niche that we wanted to permeate from a marketing and agency perspective. We'd identify, a series of events that might be great events for us. We'd either lead up to those events or, start writing about the market to try to increase our fame level. Like we have a pretty simple formula. I called it the fee structure. That's an acronym, so FEE. Basically, to command the highest fees and to get the biggest stages, you need to have fame, right? Like you can either be famous, like, whoever, Magic Johnson or, Mel Robbins, right? Like that's okay, you're famous. Or you can just be famous in a niche, like, so if I was trying to get into the construction industry and we wanted to work with the construction industry, if they've never heard of me, well, I'm not famous, so you can put a 0 in that mark. They're not going to pay a lot to have me on the bill. The next E is that you need to be entertaining. So you need to deliver a presentation that's entertaining enough that people are like, wow, I got value out of that. But I was also entertained and loved it. And the 45 minutes or hour went by like that. I had so much fun. The E you can demonstrate. So if you can get there, you can demonstrate the E, but it has to be good. The last E is you need to be an expert. And there's two sides to that coin. You can either be an expert in the construction industry, which is great, or you can be an expert in whatever you're talking about and just show proficiency there and challenge people on a bigger level. And so for us, whenever you're penetrating a new niche, you had to build up your you had to build up your fame in that industry somehow, which meant either working with a publisher or writing some articles and getting those out there so that people started seeing your name everywhere. You had to speak at events that gave you the biggest exposure in that industry so that it upped your fame quotient. And people are like, who is this person? I've never seen them before. They're all of a sudden everywhere, it seems like. We've got to have them at our event because everybody seems to be getting them. And then you also had to, drum up on your expertise as it relates to that industry so that they knew you were relatable. So I use the same strategy today to penetrate new markets every single year. This year, I've been working on the multifamily industry and it's been going great. Like I just wrote a LinkedIn article to help increase the fame and expertise quotient there to help book some more events. So yeah, it's a pretty simple strategy, but it takes a lot of diligence and focus and tracking. You need to know whether it's working or not. Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting your time. And by the way, just to be really clear, I've made some bad choices when it comes to niches. You'll spend 3-6 months trying to build up your expertise there only to find out it's not the right fit for you or, the market's not big enough or, some of these questions we could have answered at the beginning, but primarily most of them I've made mistakes, and that's okay.
Right.
But I think what's really important to know is when you penetrate a niche, you're actually booking like 6-7 years worth of business. So that construction industry example, I recently ran a report on it. So I started speaking in the construction industry. That year was 2010. We picked that niche. We went after it. Since 2010, I've spoken at about 70 or so events and generated over $600,000 or $700,000 just from that one event that first year.
That's directly related to that one event in 2010.
Yes, meaning
like spin-off and relationships that came from that.
So it works like this. Like picture a tree, right? That first event is the trunk of the tree. Then there's 3 branches that are new referrals. And even if you only close 50% of those, or in this case, 2/3 of those, you keep getting new branches, right? So even the latest event that I just booked in January of 2020 in the construction industry, I can actually track back because they said it was a referral from this event, which was only a year ago. But that event was from a year before that, which is from a year before that, which goes all the way back to this one event. So like you end up building this giant tree that came out of one event. So if you can kill it at one event and constantly get your 3 referrals, I try to maintain a 50% loss rate on all of my gigs, meaning I want to lose 50% of my gigs because that ensures that the demand is high enough to command the price I'm asking. And if I lose 50% of my gigs on price, it means I'm priced right for that time in the year and for that market and the opportunities that I'm going after. And that's how I try to maintain a busy schedule that commands the highest fees that I can command.
Totally amazing. And our friend Bill Bacharach calls that being reassuringly expensive.
I like that. I am reassuringly expensive. And I've built a, kind of formula to figure out what that is. And I even have like in my tool, I do surge pricing, which is, like the Uber concept.
Sure.
So like the busiest weeks of the year, I charge the most that I can command. And the lowest weeks of the year, I charge the least.
That's totally great.
Yeah, it's
So,
fun.
two final questions. My
Yeah,
final question is, how do people get connected and stay connected to you? And we're going to link up the show notes and the book and the website and the blog and all kinds of
sure.
stuff, whatever you want to share. Before we get to that, though, Drew, if people were to take one key concept from our conversation today or one overarching idea, what would you hope that idea is?
Oh, I think it all boils down as a speaker to referability. And I think if you can't build a referable speech, it's not worth doing much else yet. So that means like ramping up your velocity of speaking, like speak as often as you can and diligently change something every time you speak so that the speech is progressively getting better and closer to referable. And once you're in front of an audience and can consistently, by the way, deliver those 3 leads. Consistency is one of the keys that I think is missing in a lot of people and their speeches. Then you've got a referable speech, and it's worth ramping up the pricing as well as the marketing of that speech, as well as the size of the audience you're delivering it to. But referability, I think, for me, has been the key to my kind of longevity and the success long term.
For all of our listeners to be able to refer you,
yeah.
How do we get connected and stay connected to your
that's so nice of you.
whole empire, your whole everything?
Well, I think, I'll try to keep it simple. My website is akadrewdavis.com, and you'll find the Loyalty Loop episodes up there. If you're on YouTube, you can certainly subscribe there. Just search for Loyalty Loop or Andrew Davis, and you should be able to find me. And a bunch of my speeches, you should be able to find the Curiosity Factor or the Loyalty Loop and watch that stuff there, or my search for Meatloaf. Which is lots of fun. You can find me on Instagram. I'm pretty active on Instagram. I'm at Drew Davis here. And if you guys want to email me, my email address is on the website. My phone number is on the website. Happy to talk to any speakers, and always love kind of helping out the community. And my speaker schedule is there, by the way. So if you're in any of the cities that are in, on my list of upcoming appearances, shoot me a note. Just remind me what dates I'll be in that city, and I'm happy to grab coffee or something and chat for half an hour if you're around.
Totally fantastic. And I'm not going to give away the thing here, but if you're on YouTube and you're following Drew, you will find him in the shower.
Yes.
And we're going to leave it at that, my friend.
We'll leave it at that.
We're going to leave it at that. Thank you so much. You are awesome, and we definitely have to have you back.
Thanks, David. This has been fun.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.